The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
Well, it's been a pretty exciting week.
I know we have a lot to talk about.
That we do. On May 8th, President Trump had the U.S. Department of War release over 160 documents that were finally declassified on UFOs.
UAPs, UFOs, whatever you want to call them.
And there is a lot to go through. And
yeah.
Beth and I started tackling some of them, but it's going to take us a while.
We started with all the ones that you don't have to download, the ones that are just like single pages that you can read without downloading a gazillion files.
Right, because we're both looking at them on our smartphones.
Yes.
So once I get in the laptop, I'm going to download them all and comb through them.
Yeah. And you looked at the videos. I didn't look at any of the videos, and you said some of the videos were pretty amazing.
They were pretty compelling, yeah.
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't seen them yet, we will put the Department of War website, which sounds weird to say, but we will put that link in the show notes so you have a quick way to access it. And then in other news, I guess you could say, a friend of mine knows that I love archaeology and all those types of things. So when she's done with her archaeology magazines and her Smithsonian magazines, she gives them to me. And 2 months ago, in the March 2026 issue of Smithsonian, there was a little blurb about the Kryptos monument in front of the FBI building.
Right.
That we did a story on, I don't know how many episodes ago.
Quite a few.
Yeah, but at that point, there was one remaining panel that hadn't been decoded yet. And apparently, according to the Smithsonian article, there were two researchers who were writing a book about the sculptor. And they were combing through the Smithsonian archives, and they found a book. And in that book were handwritten notes by the sculptor saying what the message is.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes. So they have decoded it. But because neither one of them were attempting to decode it, they will not release what it says so that people that are into that can figure it out for themselves.
Right. So they know what it is, but still among the public, it's a mystery.
Yes.
And still is yet to be decoded.
Yes. You know what I was thinking? What if they put it in their book that they're that they're writing, and that would be a good publicity ploy for people to buy their book?
Yeah, I don't think that would go over well.
No.
So I don't think they do that.
No, not if they're saying they're keeping it to themselves because they want to honor the people that have spent years trying to figure it out.
Right. So, yeah, now there's only 3 people to know. The sculptor and them.
Yeah. That's
unbelievable.
Pretty cool. It's very, very cool. And then in additional news, which isn't really news, but it was exciting for us.
It sure was. I know what you're going to say.
Yeah. We got an email from a listener in Warminster, England, named Dan. He actually said he lives about 5 minutes outside of Warminster. But back in episode 2005, we had done the Warminster thing. And so he was just saying, that they have a mural in town and they have a museum. And we got to talking about it a little bit. And he had mentioned that recently in the last couple years, they were even finding crop circles in and around Warminster. So, Dan, that was great to hear from you, and we'll have to talk some more.
Yeah, he shot the email saying, hey, would you be interested in this? And we're like, hell yeah, of course we're interested.
Yeah.
So we're waiting to hear back from you, Dan.
Yeah.
And thank you for being a avid listener.
Yes, we appreciate you. It was a pretty cool connection there.
We love hearing from our listeners. Well, tonight we got a pretty good episode.
Yes.
So?
Want me to get started?
Of course I do, because I know you're losing your voice.
I know. I don't know what it is. Allergies have just
It's
been
the
a mess.
seasons, yes. The pollen is in the air. It's all over the car and the house, and it's awful.
You don't think about it either until you're, ready to do something in which your voice is very important. And then you realize how much it sucks. But anyway, I digress. So we've mentioned before, I think, at least, that we get ideas for our episodes from all different places. And recently, our neighbor Johnny, who I know we've mentioned before, loaned us this kick-ass book from 1971 titled Gazetteer of British Ghosts, an Illustrated Guide to 236 Haunted Sites, which, of course, is right up our alley. And I was having a great time just reading through it and skimming over some of the entries, but I didn't get very far through the A's because I came across Arundel Castle and I thought, no, not another instance of idiot me being somewhere and not knowing that it was a paranormal location.
While you were there, that happens to you an awful lot.
I know.
But you were younger then. And see, if you would have been with me, you would have known about these things.
I know, and we say that all the time. If only I had been with you.
You were such a supernatural and paranormal virgin back then.
No, I was a supernatural and paranormal anoia person, meaning I had a fear of those things, so I avoided them.
Oh.
Yeah.
What a puss.
I know. So I don't want to talk about myself on and on and on and on. So I'm just going to give you all a little bit of background. So I was in Arundel, England in 1996, and I thought it was the most magical, medieval, coolest town I had ever been to in my entire life. The River Arun, which is how it gets its name, Arundel, the River Arun runs through the town, and it was this incredible shade of blue-green that I had never seen before. And the part of the town closest to the castle just had all these medieval-era buildings, and they were really tightly packed together, and they bent around the curving streets, and it was unreal to me because it felt like I was plopped right down in the middle of a movie set. Because, obviously, we don't have stuff like that here in the United States.
No, and unfortunately, that's what's really amazing about these places to us, because we just can't imagine that type of old architecture, and you walk amongst it every day. And to them, it's probably, just an everyday thing.
Yeah, it's where I grew up. It's boring. To us, we're like, oh my gosh. So the coolest part of Arundel to me was obviously the castle itself, which is massive. And we spent 2 full days just walking around the outside, which may sound kind of weird, but I mean, my God, to walk around an actual castle that had been there for almost 1,000 years. I was just enamored with the history of it all. And eventually, we also took a tour of the inside, but at the time, the Earl of Arundel, Duke of Norfolk, was in residence. So tours of the inside of the castle were kind of limited because the family was actually living there. which I also thought was incredibly cool. I do remember seeing a dining room and the great hall and one bedroom that had a huge red brocade canopy and curtains, and we also saw the little chapel that's inside the castle. There's also a larger church right outside the castle. So as we walked along the inner walls, kind of looking down at the inner courtyard, it was easy to imagine knights in battle and women in medieval gowns walking around. But I also got a huge kick out of seeing this little red sports car parked in the driveway, because it was like, people actually live here.
A little Fiat.
I think it was a Fiat, a little red Fiat, yeah. So on our second day, as we were walking around, we were approached by this complete stranger. And I remember thinking it was kind of odd because it was the middle of August and he had on a heavy dark blue sweater. And he introduced himself as Simon Friend. How cool a name is that? Simon Friend. And he asked us if we were going to the picnic that night. And we didn't know what he was talking about, but he kept insisting, especially when he found out that we were Americans, that we had to go to this picnic. So he got on the phone with this elderly lady named Mrs. Childress, who he said he knew wasn't going to be able to use her tickets. So the next thing I know, we're meeting Simon Friend at the castle gate at 5 p.m., buying what I hoped were not fake tickets to some fake event. Because that's what you would suspect here in the United States, right? That somebody's trying to scam you. Well, it turns out Simon Friend was actually one of the organizers of this very real annual picnic. So we got to go in and sit on the castle lawn, and all around us, people, hundreds of people, were showing up with picnic baskets, except every single family also brought big folding tables, which they set up. They covered them in pristine white tablecloths. They took out candelabra. They took out crystal candle holders. They took out crystal decanters and wine glasses, and they uncorked their bottles of wine. Some of them were eating things that they were pulling out of these picnic baskets that looked to me like they came from 5-star restaurants. I'd never seen anything like it in my entire life. So as soon as it got dark, these colored lights came on, and they were aimed towards the castle ramparts. So the ramparts in some places were blue or purple or red. And then all of a sudden, about 50 of the Scottish Royal Guard stepped up to the edge of the ramparts in their kilts and started playing the bagpipes. And it was just incredible, just incredible. And as soon as they finished playing, this massive fireworks display started. So, thank you, Simon Friend, 30-something years ago, for making sure that I got to see the fireworks and the bagpipes at the picnic.
Only something like that could happen to you.
I know.
It sounds so fantastic. The ambience.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? You bring your big folding dining table. You've got the white tablecloth. It's set up pretty luxurious.
Yeah.
Sitting back in your chairs.
And these
you're
were
kind of in that medieval time period.
They were not folding chairs either. People were lugging wooden chairs from like their dining rooms up the hill.
I would too. I mean, it would really set the mood, wouldn't it? Candelabras?
Yeah. Yeah. It was amazing.
We'd have a hard time getting all our candelabras onto a plane, I think, and flying over and doing something like this.
Our carry-on luggage would be clunking together.
We'd have to rent some when we got there.
So when I saw in this book that our friend Johnny lent us that Arundel Castle is considered one of the most haunted castles in all of England, I thought, of course it is. Of course it is. So you all may have seen Arundel Castle yourself, especially if you're a Doctor Who fan.
And I am. I love Doctor Who.
It was used in several of the episodes back in the 1980s. Or if you've ever seen the film The Madness of King George from 1994, which is a great movie, or Wonder Woman.
Yeah, Wonder Woman.
You've never seen that.
I have too.
Not the movie.
I have too.
You have?
Of course I've seen Wonder Woman.
It came out in 2017.
Yeah?
We were already together then. We never saw Wonder Woman.
How do you know what I've seen?
Apparently I don't.
You don't know what I do when I'm all by myself.
They also filmed a MacGyver TV movie there back in 1994. So, anyway, just some pop culture references. So, tonight I'm going to give everybody a super highlights-only version of Arundel Castle's almost 1,000-year history. And then I'm going to get into the half-dozen ghosts that are said to haunt the castle. According to the official Arundel Castle website, 2 years after William the Conqueror took control of England in 1066, Arundel Castle was born. Initially, it was just a motte, or artificial mound, that rose 100 feet above a dry moat, with a gatehouse. It, along with a third of Sussex and Welsh marshes, was given to Roger de Montgomery, William's cousin, to reward him for his service. When Montgomery died, the motte and the moat came under the rule of King Henry I, and when he died, it transferred over to his wife, Adeliza of Louvain. When she remarried a couple years later, it then belonged to her new husband, William d'Aubigny II. He decided to have a stone keep built on the top of the motte. Empress Matilda came to Arundel Castle in 1139. She was hoping to win the throne of England. King Stephen wasn't very happy about that idea, and he attacked the castle in an attempt to capture her. Instead, a truce was signed, and Matilda was allowed to leave the castle unharmed. When King Henry II came into power, he had an actual stone castle built on the motte, and he named d'Aubigny the second Earl of Arundel. This was in 1155. When Henry II died, Richard the Lionheart found himself the owner of the castle, which he then gave back to the d'Aubigny family. Interestingly, Arundel Castle and the earldom passed down from the female heiresses, beginning with the d'Aubignys to the FitzAlans in the 13th century. Then, in the 16th century, it passed to the Howards. This is basically a complicated way of saying that since 1138, the descendants of the same family have been the Earls of Arundel and also the Dukes of Norfolk for 950 years.
That's a long time.
Same family, 950 years.
I'm jealous.
I know. So, I should explain that when the inheritance of Arundel Castle shifted through marriage from the FitzAlans to the Howards more prominent title was Duke of Norfolk. So, they stopped referring to the men as numbered Earls of Arundel and just continued numbering them as dukes. So it gets a little confusing throughout the remaining 950 years to figure out exactly what numbered Earl of Arundel it might be, because they didn't really bother with that. They just numbered the Duke titles. So the FitzAlans and the Howards were both major players in English history. For example, the third Duke of Arundel was Anne Boleyn's and Catherine Howard's uncle. The cousins both became wives of Henry VIII, and they were both beheaded. The third Duke himself barely escaped his own beheading, and he was only saved by the death of Henry VIII. The fourth Earl of Arundel wasn't so lucky. He was beheaded for his part in planning the marriage of Mary, Queen of Scots. The 13th Earl, Philip Howard, was imprisoned in the Tower of London for over a decade under charges of treason and being a Roman Catholic. He died of dysentery in the Tower in 1595. He also had a little black dog in the Tower with him, which I will get to later. During the English Civil War between 1643 and 1644, Arundel Castle came under siege not once, but twice. The first time, the Royalist garrison lost all of their supplies and didn't have any water after Sir William Waller's men drained the lake that supplied water to the entire town. The castle was so severely damaged that it wasn't completely fixed until 1718. In 1846, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert came to stay at Arundel Castle for 3 days. Wanting to impress the royal couple, the then Earl of Arundel commissioned an entire set of bedroom furniture and all new library furniture just for her visit. 3 years earlier, the Earl had paid for the Queen's portrait to be done by William Fowler. The 14th Earl was called the Collector for a good reason. He filled the castle with masterworks by master painters like Van Dyck, Thomas Gainsborough, and Italian landscape painter Canaletto. But he also went on several excavations in Rome and Turkey and brought back several ancient Roman statues, which are known as the Arundel marbles. He was so well known for finding and keeping statues that one visitor to Istanbul said that the reason there weren't hardly any antiquities left in the city was because they had all gone to Arundel. The 15th Earl of Arundel, Henry, had electric lights, central heating, elevators, firefighting equipment, and its very own water supply installed during his lifetime. He passed away in 1914. The electric installation alone cost him £36,000. Now, it might seem pretty reasonable to update the castle with these types of amenities, but keep in mind at this time period, even smaller mansions were still relying on their servants to carry hot water to their bedrooms and their bathrooms, all the way up until 1930. So it was actually pretty amazing that he had the entire castle outfitted with these things by 1914.
Well, he certainly had the money to do it. So why not?
I guess he did. Yeah. When I was sitting on the lawn of Arundel Castle in 1996, the fortress was under the guidance of Miles FitzAlan Howard, the 17th Duke of Norfolk and the 35th Earl of Arundel. Known as the, quote, reluctant Duke who cleans his own shoes, he once said that he had followed the, quote, wavy line of succession, and that he knew inheriting his titles was, quote, just going to bloody well happen, and one tried to prepare for it, end quote. When he passed away in 2002, his full titles were Earl of Arundel, Baron Beaumont, Baron Maltravers, Earl of Surrey, Baron Fitzalan Clune and Oswaldester, Earl of Norfolk, Baron Howard of Glossop, Earl Marshal and Hereditary Marshal and Chief Butler of England, and Duke of Norfolk. It's a lot.
Yeah, how does one remember all that?
Well, the cool thing is, one of his titles, and don't ask me which one, any of our British listeners will probably know, but yeah, I'm American. One of his titles means that he has to be at the coronation of every king or queen.
Right.
Which is pretty cool.
Can you imagine handing out your card? You know how big it'd have to be?
Be a scroll.
Be like an index card. Yeah.
Here, take my parchment. Well, I like this guy. I love this guy. He shocked everyone when he spoke out against the Catholic Church denouncing birth control, when he famously said, quote, "How can you ask a married couple to do it by thermometers and whatnot? My wife and I did that. It didn't bloody work. Has everybody got to have 8 children like my mother?"
Oh, my God. He is awesome.
Isn't he?
I bet you he'd be a fun dude to hang out with.
Well, unfortunately, he passed away in 2002.
Well, I was still around then.
Right. His son, the 18th Duke of Norfolk and 36th Earl of Arundel, Edward Fitzalan Howard, lives at Arundel Castle today. So, that was my super quick Cliff Notes version of the history of Arundel Castle. And I do hope that I got all the timelines right. I struggle sometimes with British history because of all the Henrys and Williams and Edwards, which it's hard for me to follow because, you know, there's William the First and the Third and the 10th and the... So anyway, if I got anything wrong, it was not on purpose. But with that said, let's get to the hauntings. So I think it's really kind of cool that 2 of the 7 entities said to haunt the castle are actually animals, which you don't hear about all that often, especially when one of them is a bird.
I don't mind animals, but I hate birds, especially now if one's a ghost.
You won't like this one.
How do you swat a ghost bird away?
You don't. And then you go hide because this one is a harbinger of bad things. Allegedly, a small white bird has been seen fluttering just outside the castle's windows throughout time. And each time that it's been seen, the bird seemed to be a harbinger of death, since each time that it had been seen, the Duke has died. The most talked about time was the death of Henry, the 15th Duke, in 1917. So the white bird was seen a lot before his demise. There's also a black dog, but this is not the scary, aggressive kind of black dog that we've covered on the show before. This is the apparition of a little black dog that once belonged to St. Philip Howard, the 13th Earl from the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. He was the one who spent a decade imprisoned in the Tower of London because he refused to renounce his faith, and he was only saved by Henry VIII's death. Well, apparently, like I'd mentioned earlier, he kept his little black dog in the tower with him. There have been, apparently, several times when children visiting Arundel Castle have asked the adults where the little black dog has gone to. When the adults ask, "What little black dog?" the children always say, you know, the one that was just running around the library, happy as can be. So the apparition has been seen quite often, but only by children.
You know what would be really cool?
If the dog caught the bird?
No.
Oh.
But now that you mention it, ghost poop. Ghost dog poop. Wouldn't that be so cool?
Spectral poop?
Yes.
Does it smell?
I don't know.
How do you clean it up? Does it just disappear?
I have no clue. I've never really thought about it before. It just clicked in my mind.
Could you imagine being able to sell ghost poop as proof of existence of animal ghosts?
I think I just had a great idea.
No. You know those things at Christmas time when, you're strapped for cash and so you get a little baggie and you put little tiny white marshmallows in it and you say it's snowman poop?
Yeah.
We can get some little higher class Ziploc baggies and put the marshmallows in and just say that it's spectral dog poop.
This could be a money-making marketing thing for us. We're not making any money on the podcast. This we could probably make money on. Well, continue.
Well, as for the human spirits, there are at least 5. The one that seems to have been around the longest is the ghost of Roger D. Montgomery, who has been seen wandering around the castle grounds dressed in his Norman-era clothes. His apparition has been seen standing on top of the keep, looking down on his creation. According to ConnectParanormal.net, his apparition always fades away soon after it's spotted. Cameras and other battery-operated equipment tend to go wonky near the keep. And since the keep is made of limestone, there's the theory that it's a good conductor for spiritual energy to manifest. There are also reports of people hearing somebody working in the castle's kitchen, banging pots and pans around and generally making a bit of a ruckus. But when people go to see who's in the kitchen making the noise, the kitchen is completely empty, except for the muffled sound of crying. When some visitors and staff have stood near the area where dishwashing used to take place, they've felt someone tugging on their clothes, but it's as if a child is trying to get their attention. And even creepier are the child-size wet footprints that have appeared immediately after the floor has just been swept. The general consensus is that a former scullery boy or serving boy's residual spirit is still there, desperately trying to complete his duties. People suspect that he was actually beaten to death for making some sort of mistake in the kitchen over 200 years ago. Which explains the crying, and it's sad.
Yeah, it's extremely depressing.
I know.
Poor kid.
I know. Maybe he gets to play with the dog. That would be nice.
Oh, maybe so.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
A third spirit is the apparition of the Blue Man, who, according to GreatCastles.com, has been seen since the reign of Charles II. He's dressed like a cavalier from the English Civil War, so about 1630, 1640-ish, which is around the same time reports of his apparition first started. He's frequently spotted in the library, where he seems to search through several books, as if he's looking for some piece of information. Interestingly, or at least I found this interesting, is that the book that he finally seems to settle on before he disappears is never the same one. According to ConnectParanormal.com, even library staff at the castle who have been alone in the library have reported the sound of papers rustling behind them and feeling as if someone is watching them, which they also attribute to the Blue Man. It's interesting because if he was really, say he was looking for some sort of piece of information that he desperately needed to find and couldn't find it, it makes sense that every time his apparition fades, he's holding a different book. It's never the same book.
Well, it makes sense.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I'd want to, take down notes of all the different...
I'm sure they have.
Yeah.
You would think that they would document every occurrence that's happened.
And do the books span beyond what his lifespan would have been?
Right.
Right? Like if it was a book published 100 years ago or something that he had in his hands.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So I didn't mention this earlier in my history tour of the castle, but not far from the castle, up on a hill in Arundel Park, is a Gothic tower that stands all by itself. It was built in 1797 by Francis Horne as a way to showcase his talent while he was hoping to win a bid to rebuild the actual castle. This tower was used a lot in the Doctor Who episodes. But the fourth apparition of Arundel Castle is tied to this tower. I don't usually read things verbatim, but the description of this apparition from the Great Castle's website is so good that I want to share it verbatim. They wrote, quote, "On moonlit nights, a pale spectral woman in flowing white drifts near Horne's tower, her footsteps silent on the dew-soaked grass. Sometimes she is seen gliding up the spiral stairs before dissolving into the shadows. Legends murmur of a heartbroken soul cast aside by her lover, who scaled the tower's heights and vanished into the night's embrace." End quote. Well, there's also a lady in white that's seen inside Arundel Castle itself. Witnesses claim that her apparition usually manifests first with an overwhelming scent of lilacs. Then she turns into or manifests further as an ethereal figure dressed in white robes, and she moves from one bedchamber to another. Some people who have seen her have reported feeling an overwhelming sadness, as if her despair is affecting them. Although it's not clear if this lady in white is the same one that makes her way to Horne's tower, staff at the castle believe that she might have been a countess who died in childbirth. So she could be an entirely different apparition than the tower ghost, or she could be the same one. In 1958, a young man was training at the castle to be a footman, and one of his duties was to go outside to the drawbridge and turn the lights off. Will you just go out to the drawbridge and turn the lights off, Hank?
What a job.
Hey, at least they didn't have to light the lanterns and then go snuff them. They could just flip a switch, right?
Yeah, I think I would prefer to go snuff the lanterns. Can you imagine the ambiance of it all?
I know. So one night, again, this is 1958, one night as he was halfway down the drawbridge, he suddenly saw another man about 15 feet ahead of him, walking in the exact same direction. The trainee picked up his pace to try and catch up with this guy, who he thought was an intruder, obviously. The intruder had longish blonde hair and was dressed in a gray tunic with loose sleeves. The trainee could clearly see this guy's head and shoulders all the way down to his waist, but there was nothing below that. He had no legs.
Yikes.
It was like just the top half of the man was somehow walking down the drawbridge. As the trainee tried to make sense of what he was seeing, the man in gray just simply faded away. The poor kid thought, nope, and He immediately turned around and ran back to the castle.
Really?
Yes.
I would love to see something like that there.
I know, wouldn't that be cool? I wonder if he made it through the rest of his training, or if they were like, dude, your one job.
Well, we'll never know.
Right.
Unless he's one of our listeners. And if you are, send us an email.
Hopefully not a hateful one. You try being in my shoes, you dumbass Americans. Although the Fitzallen Chapel right next to the castle isn't known for spotting apparitions, it is considered a hot spot for paranormal activity. Now, I know I walked by it several times when I was there, but I don't remember if I ever went inside of it or not. Apparently, visitors have reported hearing singing coming from inside. But when they peer in the windows to see who's practicing or who's singing, there's nobody inside. They also have caught all kinds of light anomalies in photographs. When workers were doing restorations in the 1980s, they kept losing tools, only to have them reappear in odd places. They also complained of being touched or being pushed while they were working.
That seems to be a common occurrence with workers, construction workers, at a lot of places.
Yeah.
That have history.
Not to divert from our topic, but I was going to say to you earlier today, it's funny to me with all the road construction going on in front of the house that we haven't had some stuff happening here the last few days.
Well, it's early yet. We still might have something tonight. You never know. Or in the next couple days.
Yeah. I'm wondering if it's only when it's direct stuff being done to the house, though. I don't know. But I thought it was worth noting. The last paranormal, or at least totally unexplained occurrence at Arundel Castle is the occasional sound of cannon and gunfire that no one has any explanation for. It's as if the castle sometimes, it's during the day and not just at night, but it's as if the castle is under some sort of muted, muffled attack from centuries earlier. Imagine standing on the castle grounds on a perfectly still night and hearing the muffled sounds of a battle unfolding around you or happening around you. It's pretty cool. So, no, I didn't know any of this as I walked around Arundel Castle in my own little mesmerized world of geeky history loving. But even without knowing about the ghosts, it's still one of the coolest places that I've ever been to in my entire life. Hey, did you know? Excavations at an animal necropolis in Egypt revealed 800 burials, including cats, dogs, and 35 Indian macaques. Believed to be a status symbol pet for high-ranking Roman military officers, the macaques' graves also included baby animals, such as piglets and kittens, leading historians to speculate that the macaques themselves had pets. Who'da thunk it?
Well, Beth, that was quite the who'da thunk it.
Monkeys with pets.
Yeah, who'da thunk it?
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to tell all you fellow wanderers tonight about 2 100-year-old unsolved cold cases. Construction workers in Saskatoon back in June of 2006 were excavating a former gas station in the Sutherland neighborhood in order to remove old gas tanks, when they happened to break into the side of an old water well. What they weren't expecting was to find a human skull. After the initial shock and the police got involved, it quickly became obvious that it wasn't an accidental excavation of something like a forgotten former cemetery. It was actually a crime scene. The skull was actually part of several remains found stuffed inside a burlap sack that was enclosed in a wooden barrel that someone had thrown down the well. But whoever had thrown the barrel down there didn't realize that part of the wall had caved in, and the barrel had gotten lodged only partway down the well shaft. According to WJA.com, the burlap sack held quite a bit besides the victim's skull. It also contained a woman's tailored jacket, a high-colored blouse, a long skirt, and squared-toe boots. There was also a man's vest and trousers, and there were also a bunch of glass bottles. According to the article, the mixture of gasoline and water had turned the contents into a perfectly preserved time capsule, and historians were able to easily date the clothing from between 1910 to 1920. The bottles provided an even more exact date, 1916 to 1918. The victim had died sometime between those 2 years, making the crime scene over 100 years old. During 1916, the site of the former gas station was a boarding house called the Shore Hotel. So initially, investigators assumed that the female victim was one of many boarders who got off a train in town and spent just a few days at the boarding house. So it could literally be anyone. But investigators tried to narrow it down. Forensic analysis, done in 2006, suggested that the victim was a white woman around the age of 35 with light brown or reddish hair. She stood about 5'1" and was likely Irish, and she had obviously been murdered. But for almost 25 years, the identity of the woman in the well was a total mystery. It was a cold case, but not a forgotten one. Ever since 2006, Dr. Ernie Walker, an anthropology and archaeology professor, worked with the Toronto Police Service's investigative genetic genealogy team to analyze the woman in the well's DNA samples taken from her hair and 2 teeth.
You would think the Toronto Police Service's investigative genetic genealogy team would have an acronym.
You would think so, and we probably should have gave it one because, unlike you, I had a very hard time with that one. Then they painstakingly created a family tree for her, and in September of 2025, they were able to give her name back, Alice Burke Spence. According to allthat'sinteresting.com, Alice Burke was originally from Michigan. She was born there in 1881 to Irish parents. In 1902, the Burke family moved to Duluth, Minnesota. Alice worked as a seamstress. Within 2 years, she had met and married prosperous farmer Charles Spence, and in 1905, their daughter Idella was born. The 3 of them moved to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in 1913. Charles continued to prosper as a farmer. In 1916, Alice gave birth to a second daughter, who passed away later that same day. She was buried in a grave marked Baby Girl Spence. Then, in 1918, while Alice, Charles, and Adela were out of town, their home in Saskatoon burned down. Although, it's not clear if Alice was out of town at all, since there aren't any records of her after 1916. Now remember, the bottles in the burlap sack were from 1916 to 1918, so she may not have gone out of town. But what we do know is that no one was in the house when it was lost in the fire. In 1921, the census records list Charles Spence as being married, but the members of his household included Idella, who was 15 then, their housekeeper, and the housekeeper's son. So, Alice isn't even mentioned.
That's weird.
It is. In 1923, when Charles passed away from a heart attack at just 40 years old, after bringing in his wheat harvest, His obituary listed him as a widower. According to Cindy Camp, Alice Spence's great-granddaughter, her grandmother Idella didn't talk about her mother, Alice, all that often, but she did say that she was orphaned at 17, which was how old she would have been in 1923 when her father died. So with that said, I'm sure you're all thinking to yourselves that this doesn't entirely line up, and I imagine you all have some questions.
I do.
And although investigators have been able to give Alice Spence her name back, it is still a complete mystery as far as who murdered her, and when, and exactly why. Toronto police, according to The Independent, do have a suspect, but they've stated that since it's purely circumstantial and the case is over 100 years old and the suspect is no longer living and could not defend themselves, that they will not reveal who they suspect it might have been. And quite frankly, since this is all fairly new to Alice Spence's descendants, I don't feel that it's right speculating either. But I am glad that the woman in the well finally has her name back. It's the kind of thing that matters the most to me. And who knows, maybe in the coming years, once the family has time to process and talk about their information that they've got, they might share more of the story with us.
It's cool that she has her name back, at least. I mean, it took 20 years, but they did it.
That is very nice, but I'd like to know more about what happened to her.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, where did she go? They were married. Then it shows them as widowed. What happened to her?
Right. Well,
besides being murdered.
I was going to say, because somebody stuffed her in a barrel and threw her down a well.
That's not a laughing matter, dear.
No.
That's very tragic.
I know.
So why are you giggling?
I'm not.
Is it my facial expressions across from you?
It could be.
You're not always nice, you know.
Oh, yes, I am.
Let me carry on with my next case.
You have another one, don't you?
Of course I do. I said I had two. The second case occurred in Parma, Ohio, in February of 1921. It was a small town of just 1,000 residents. According to Cleveland 19, on February 17, 1921, 3 kids were walking to school around 8:30 in the morning. 2 of them were siblings, a 14-year-old boy and his 16-year-old sister, and one was a neighborhood boy who was just 6. As the 3 kids walked down Bean Road, which is now Ridgewood Drive, they were doing their best to navigate the ice and mud. It was a long, isolated stretch of road with no houses. They noticed something weird in the middle of the road, and as they got closer, it became apparent that it was 2 badly beaten bodies. Now, as you can imagine, these 3 kids were horrified to discover that it was 2 of their teachers, 38-year-old Louise Wolfe and 24-year-old Mabel Foote. Terrified, the kids took off running towards the school, and when they got there, all of their classmates were just standing outside in the cold because there was no one there to let them in. When police arrived at the scene, they discovered that the road leading up to the bodies had been shredded in a way that indicated a terrible struggle and that a dented umbrella was likely used to fend off the women's attacker. Both women had been badly beaten, and their clothes were shredded, but there was no evidence that either of them had been robbed. All their jewelry and money was still there, and neither of them had been sexually assaulted. Nearby was a bloody fence rail with brown and blonde hair wrapped around it. But 2 days later, hundreds of looky-loos descended on Parma, filling Bean Road with tire tracks, and the mud was ankle-deep, pretty much ruining any chance for further forensic analysis. Which I don't understand why this wasn't cordoned off.
Because they didn't do stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, it just seems like common sense to me. I mean...
Well, look at the Villisca axe murder house when all the people in the town went into the house and started taking pieces of the skull. I mean, people were...
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Common sense doesn't always win.
Yeah.
These looky-loos also pestered the school children, asking to hear the story of the gruesome murder over and over. Police were able to piece together that both Louise and Mabel typically stayed at the school each day until around 5 p.m., grading papers and things like that. They routinely caught the 5:30 streetcar out of town. A witness who lived across the street from the school confirmed that he saw them leave at their usual time. Police found Mabel's overnight case at the scene and pieced together that she often spent the night at her cousin's house when she wanted a break from her rambunctious brothers. So her family hadn't thought anything about her not coming home that night because it wasn't all that unusual. It was also her first year teaching at the Parma school. Louise was also the principal. She was unmarried and lived with another woman. Louise had grown up in several different relatives' homes, and she and her brother had a difficult childhood. But the police had zero motive, especially since neither of the teachers had been robbed. One of them was still wearing her diamond ring. Mabel's watch was stopped at exactly 5:15 p.m. Residents were so angered that 200 of them formed a posse and went out looking for any potential killer. Unfortunately, they came up empty, but they also inadvertently destroyed more evidence in the process. Miraculously, the police did have a few leads, or at least additional weird clues. According to Cleveland Magazine, the school children told police that they'd overheard Miss Mabel talking about a stranger she had met on Bean Road the day before. There was a random chicken coop filled with blood at an orchard nearby, and a book with Mabel's name in it was found in a barn 5 miles away, with a letter tucked inside, written by the self-professed killer. The police received a letter from a man named Arthur Illenfeld, who claimed to have witnessed the whole thing. But here's the thing, the police kind of shrugged him off. They referred to him as a, quote, mental defective.
Nice. Which is, it's common in 1921 to label people that way, but...
That it is.
Yeah.
However, one expert assigned to the case said that Arthur's fingerprints resembled the ones found on the victims' bodies. Local kids referred to him as a peeping Tom. According to Cleveland 19, cops escorted Arthur to the crime scene, and he was able to describe the murders in great detail. But the sheriff wasn't convinced, saying that Arthur could have gotten all of his details from the newspaper's articles. So, although he was never charged and never really considered a suspect, they did have him committed to the Lima State Hospital for criminal insanity.
Geez, whether he deserved it or not, huh?
Well, like we had mentioned before, it was over 100 years ago.
This is true.
And these things happened.
Right. And I guess if he was coming forward and claiming he did it, and then he was a known peeping Tom, maybe they had reason.
Yeah. I wonder, this guy had to be on the radar. They must have known he was a peeping Tom.
Unless he was just an innocent man that the town was targeting.
That could very well be, too. Maybe it was just one of these guys that just stood around and, he had some mental problems. He just stood around and he kind of looked at what was going on with people.
Right.
Maybe people watching.
We never know.
He might have been kind of creepy looking, so he was labeled as, a peeping Tom.
Right.
That's just one little, it could be.
Right, a possibility.
Maybe that's the brighter side to it. Or maybe he was just, climbing up ladders, looking into people's windows, too.
Right.
Could have been a total perv.
Right.
But here's the thing, they weren't sexually assaulted.
Which you would expect.
You would think so.
Right. And none of their stuff was stolen.
Maybe he just liked watching people get undressed. Maybe he wasn't sexually. Maybe they didn't do it for him sexually.
Right.
Oh, which
It's all speculation. We have no idea.
No, but it just got me thinking.
Yeah.
Years later, a man named Fred Getling confessed to the murders. He was arrested in 1923 for the axe murder of Cleveland man Harry Klein. He was also institutionalized at Lima State Hospital. His confession was later proven to be false.
Be interesting if the two men knew each other once they were both there. And maybe he got it into his head that he had something to do with it, this Getling guy.
It could very well be. We're never going to know.
And what's up with the axe murder? The axe murders of the 1920s. It was like the popular...
Well, because they were readily available.
Yeah.
I imagine just about every home that was using wood for their fireplaces had a chopping block outside with an axe stuck in it.
Right. But wouldn't it be safe to say that they also all had guns? Maybe not.
I don't know.
Yeah. But axes, definitely.
I imagine a majority of them had guns, but axes for sure.
Right.
It was also noted as somewhat odd that Mabel's uncle, Charles Foote, went out into the woods along Bean Road night after night, completely alone, with nothing but a flashlight. He said that he was hell-bent on looking for and capturing the killer. But despite a $10,000 reward being offered, the Parma teacher's murders remain, to this day, unsolved.
Huh. Why would the uncle be going out in the woods night after night after night alone with a flashlight?
He wanted the $10,000 reward because I'm sure it was open to everyone, including family members probably.
I don't know. Maybe it's just the way my mind works, but it sounds to me more like he was looking to make sure that there wasn't any other evidence around.
Well,
that he'd accidentally left behind.
He quite possibly could have been.
Right.
But I think $10,000 is
greater motivator
to get out there every night with a flashlight.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it's not like the murderer is going to hang around in the bushes, though.
Who knows? They might be coming back to the scene of the crime.
That's true.
They could be somebody local.
Yeah.
Or it could have been just a drifter.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, who knows? It's all purely speculation on our part. I mean, it does get your mind wandering as what could have happened.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been somebody that's a drifter. It could have been somebody in town.
Mm-hmm. And just think about that, the sense of fear that it instills in all those people in that town, you know, knowing that there was somebody out there and they have no idea who it is, you know.
Yeah, I imagine there were a lot of people getting weird looks. They were all suspicious of each other.
Yeah, yeah. And then those kids being pestered to tell the story over and over.
That's pretty sick.
That's awful.
You think adults would know better.
Right.
But it's, you know, the early 1900s in America. Jesus, we had some stupid people back then. I mean, we got some stupid people now, but my God, you know, I mean.
I don't know about stupid. They just had a different sense of what was morally acceptable, or a different sense of what a child's mind could handle, or a different sense of, you know, life in general.
Really young teenagers, you know, their brains are still being formed.
This is true, but in 1921, a 14 and a 16-year-old were probably doing as much work as a 40-year-old adult today.
Well, yeah, that's true, too.
You know, they certainly had more responsibilities.
I just think if I would have been back then, I'd be going, hey, don't walk through the crime scene, you bunch of numbskulls.
Right.
I mean, we want to catch the killer.
Right.
Hey, don't tell your kid that, you know, how they weren't sexually assaulted or how they were badly beaten. My God.
Yeah. Well, anyway, if you would like to know more about Arundel Castle, Just email me and I'll tell you all about it. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, she will. She loves going on about all the places that she's been and all the weird things that have happened to her.
I love going on and on about it.
Yeah, and why don't you tell everybody how about everywhere you go, someone drops dead or something bad happens.
That is weird.
It is.
It's very, very weird. So when I went to... I got to get it in the right order because you caught me off guard. When I went to England the first time and we came back, within 2 weeks, Princess Diana had died. And actually, I had gone to work and I was hearing people talking about it. And at first I thought it was a joke, like I didn't believe it. Then I had gone to Italy and the Pope died. And then I went to Yosemite, and within a week of coming back from Yosemite, a ranger had walked too close to one of the big geysers thingies and had fallen through the crust and had been burned alive. But I don't think, based on other bad things that have continued to happen when the person I was traveling with is now traveling without me.
She's referring to her ex-husband.
I don't think it was me that was causing the bad things to happen.
Well, we're still waiting for a verdict on that. Really, nothing's happened to me yet.
No, but we also haven't really gone anywhere.
Not that far.
No.
Yeah. So, who knows? The verdict's still out. She may have had something to do with all this. She could be a suspect.
A suspect.
Or perhaps she's not.
Every time I leave my little humble abode, it knocks the cosmic juju out of whack.
Yeah. Well, with all of you knowing that, I hope to see all of you again next week for another episode of Where Minds Wander.
Yes, and as I had started off saying before, if you want to know more about Arundel Castle or the 2 100-year-old cold cases, you can always check our sources in our show notes.
Join us next week, and I hope to be here for an all-new episode of Where Minds Wander.
See you soon.
Or not.
Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.